Hello.
Mike should be live now.
Live? There we go. Now they're on. Good afternoon. Welcome to this meeting of the Alternative Educator Preparation Application Review Committee. We want to welcome Jessica as a new staff support.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here and getting us all set up. Catcher, could you call the roll, please?
Yes, Madam Chair and members, is Member Reedy, are you on the phone?
Yes, I am.
And then we also have members Robledo, Garcia, Peasley, and Aragon, and that is full attendance other than our vacant position.
All right, thank you very much. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 2:03 in the afternoon, November 25th. At this point, I'd like to note that it's time to call to the public. This is the time for the public to comment on agenda items. Members of the committee may not discuss items that are not specifically identified on the agenda. Therefore, pursuant to ARS 38-431.01H, action taken as a result of public comment will be limited to directing staff to study the matter, responding to any criticism, or scheduling the matter for further consideration and decision at a later date. Is there any call to the public for today?
Madam Chair and members, we have not received any request to speak forms, though I will mention that we did receive a public comment from Hawaii's executive director of the Hawaii Teacher Standards Board, which I sent you an electronic copy. We just received that before the meeting, so I sent you an electronic copy, but there's also a hard copy that's with your materials up there.
Could you review that for us, please?
Yes, it is. The letter is dated actually on the 20th, and it is regarding the applicant, and they were recently provisionally approved in Hawaii for secondary in English, math, science, and English as a second language. And that includes some information on what they provided to Hawaii.
All right, thank you very much. Well, congratulations. Teacher Wade for that achievement. Okay, then I think what I would like to do is go forward with the application review. I just want to thank you so much for taking that time, redoing the application, and putting just an amazing amount of effort into this application that is quite comprehensive in nature. So is there anything, before we get started on the application, is there anything, a statement that spokesperson would like to make?
If I may, we did prepare a presentation. It was noted that if I went through it, I should go through it quickly and only highlight changes that may affect what we put through. So not everything will highlight changes, but I could, if it's okay, I could move through in a very quick way.
Absolutely, please do. Okay. Thank you.
You do have it up there? Yeah. Perfect. And I will
There you go.
be expeditious with this. Thank you very much. I'm Renee Frey, so as a matter of introduction, and it's nice to see everybody again. Mm-hmm. The mission of what we're trying to accomplish is to develop, certify, and place amazing teachers within local communities, and that's with Classroom. We also work globally in education through Teachaway, and with Schoolie, we provide online math supports for students, over 200,000 in Ontario. So as a global education company, we just wanted to highlight that. Before I got any further, I would like to thank the board for taking the time to meet with us again, for spending the inordinate amount of time reviewing 2 proposals that we've sent to you, and for the feedback that you gave us last time. It was substantive and valuable, and hopefully we've addressed some of the areas for improvement. So thank you for that. This is about our company. I think I can probably move quickly through that for the purpose of time. This is who will be here today. Myself, Casey Armstrong, Annie Tran, Sarah Kett, Irma Berardi, Kathy Freericks, and on the phone joining us probably in 15 minutes or so is Dr. Nikki Wishart. She may be able to provide some insights as to the curriculum as it's being used today. At the highest level, I can't help myself but say this, the mission of the company is to ensure every student experiences the power of a great teacher, and teacher being central to that experience and the student being the outcome. As you go through. And the program mission is to prepare globally competent teachers for a world in which they're needed. This is the programmatic model. I think it's important to quickly highlight this and go through it, although not a change. I do think it sets the stage for the things that we do. On the outside of that, you'll see to create a world where every student experiences the power of a great teacher. And in doing that, we want to train teachers that are professionally curious, globally competent, culturally aware, digitally adept, and reflective practitioners through this program. And inside, you'll see preparing globally competent teachers for a world in which they're needed. We set out to do that. This is a slide I haven't presented before. I will do it quickly because it's not directly about the application. But in terms of how we designed our course, we look at 3 different areas in terms of the learning experience design. One is, what's the pedagogy that's going into it? Theory-based, research-informed, learning by doing, questioning and inquiry. Then there's the instructional design where we use ADDIE, which is analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. And then the user experience, making sure that we're doing that using modern technology that allows for us to both see the learning taking place and assess that learning. This is the accreditation process that we went through for the state of Hawaii specifically. The reviewers are listed on the left that were chosen for their experience in teacher education, as well as some of them for their experience in online teacher education, highlighting Dr. Deborah Rickey, who is Assistant Dean at Grand Canyon University. She was on the team that did a substantive review. In terms of what we did for this application, we wanted to focus on the feedback that you'd given us. So a greater focus on Arizona's professional standards, teaching and subject, identifying most recent research in sources, and seeing the most recent things that have come out of the Arizona State Board of Education, a greater emphasis on exceptional and gifted students, as well as students with specific learning disabilities. We wanted to provide a better number and a cross-section of clear and detailed curricular content examples so as to hopefully highlight the things that we had done. And in other areas, we added details on our current ratio and current assets and some additional around program success data. This is just the formatting. I can talk through how we formatted. Is that valuable? Yeah?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. For each standard, we wanted to start with the narrative as to how we have set out to meet that standard inside of the learning. So it starts with a narrative as to what the overall objective is. From there, we wanted to give numbered examples and locations as to where you would find that in the learning. So Module 4, Lesson 4. And then the summary would provide an overview of the objectives. It also links to the readings that are assigned with it and the scaffoldings before handing in crucial assignments. And then those learning goals as listed there, that is the estimated time to complete, as well as, what are the learning goals that we're trying to accomplish from that specific standard. Each standard that we put forward this time also came with a matrix at the end. So we said these are areas that we assess in the course, and this is how we think they may apply to that. So by providing that matrix, we wanted to show a little bit about where the different points that we would be assessing these throughout the course. And then we also talk about, at a high level, the number of components where, may apply to that standard. That's the data matrix component. It's the graded component, and we also include the location. And then in the columns, we say which of the standard identifiers are associated with it. This is a very high level. There's the core coursework, field experiences, and then clinical placement. That makes up the work that the candidates will go through. This at a high level is the elementary application, which is modules 1 through 4, role of the teacher, learner development and experiences, assessing student learning and planning for instruction, instructional strategies, different methods modules, culturally responsive teaching, and then that clinical placement component. At the secondary level, the four modules, different modules, culturally responsive teaching and the clinical placement. So it looks a little bit different. For the purpose of clarity, we wanted to highlight the assessment of teacher candidates just so that it was clear how this is being done on a 4.0 grade point scale. When we look at it, we're using 3.5 to 4 as fully developed or an excellent candidate for a teacher preparation program. 3 to 3.5 is adequately developed or developing well. 2 to 3 is developing, and then 1 to 2 is underdeveloped. And then from that, the assessment model breaks into the two major components, 35% to the teaching performance component and 65% to the academic progress component. Did you guys have any questions about what I've said so far?
No.
Okay. The teaching performance component is weighted based on 4 components, the logbook, formal observations, informal observations, and reflective inquiry. The formal observations are based on the Danielson framework for teaching and carry the biggest weight. People must maintain a 3.0 in both the clinical placement and the coursework in order to be put forward for licensure. This is a summary of what takes place in the elementary and how the grades are distributed from that to get to your 100%. And then on the right, you'll see the different types of assessments that we do. So submissions, portfolio submissions, mentor meetups, discussions, and field experiences and what weight they carry, as well as what the total number that we would be looking at as they go through the course. Again, you'd see the same for secondary. And I'm happy to come back to these as part of future conversation if you'd like. Under program success, we tried to tailor this response because we had 250 words to the things that show up in the legal requirement for the biennial report. So the first requirement was to track all substantive changes to curriculum. And so we included some commentary around how when curriculum's changed, how the curriculum review process take place, and that the fact that that would be documented and put forward as part of any biannual report. The second piece of that was data storage and access to digital data. So that's just the mechanisms that we did that. The third piece was just saying who our signing authority was, so we didn't address it here. And the fourth piece was how are you going to measure program success in terms of the data that you're collecting? From here, we talk at a high level about enrollees, graduation rate, success rate to recommendation for licensure, years dedicated to the teaching profession. In terms of candidate success, we document that heavily throughout the course. And then we have the impact measures at 1, 3, and 5 years after graduation to see how they're performing in the classroom with an indirect link to student outcomes. The last sentence that we added there, the Arizona Framework for Educator Effectiveness, is although there's changes happening at the state level, it's still we thought that was the best mechanism to attach our ongoing impact measures to student outcomes, because it's very difficult to get access to student data, because even with the changes, the requirement still 20 to 33% of those assessment of teachers is going to come on student performance. And so the reason we've included that, and when we get into some of the surveys, why they've been written the way they've been doing is for impact measures to get to student outcomes. We thought this was a very appropriate way to do it. This is taking the dense data that we did and then linking to other areas where we talk about LMS analytics and how we make decisions. But in terms of the coursework and clinical placement data, we capture that data as they go through the course. So that's continuous. The surveys are done at the completion of modules, so we would have 100% accuracy with how people are rating our modules and then how our grading is done with them. Same with the clinical placement as the requirements for them to complete those surveys. The outcome measures, much of that data is collected. The qualitative data is collected in terms of the admissions framework. So when we looked at our admissions forms, grade, GPA, experience with education, statement of intent, how we scored them, and teaching philosophy is all captured there. And then as we continue forward, capturing that graduation rate, who finishes the core coursework, how many are successfully recommended for licensure, and then how many years they stay in the profession after that are some of the outcome measures that we'd be looking at. In terms of the impact measures, that's where we have the employer survey and a graduate survey, which we would do for all program participants. We also wanted to capture a group so that instead of having potentially data where one person answers in 1 year and at 3 you get it from somebody else, because it can be a little bit harder to get clean data, is to do a longitudinal study of that over time by capturing a core group up front and getting them to commit to providing that data over the 5-year period. That would then give us a 5-year study period with one specific focus group from each cohort to be able to see, what are the impacts of that as a representative group, and the student outcomes based on district level assessments.
Mr. Frey, do you have this model in place right now for any of your other programs covering this longitudinal data?
So we've just launched in Hawaii. We're doing the exact same stuff that we're doing here in Hawaii. The first cohort is nearing the end of the coursework. And so that's where we have the entry data in terms of admissions and what the GPA was, what the standard deviation was, what the mean age was. Do they have military experience? These kinds of that kind of data, but we don't have comparative data to those outcome and impact measures as it stands today.
That's good. Thank you.
But we are using the same methodology. This would just be a description of the some basic statistical analysis. And then how would we use that data? The coursework decisions, you evaluate student performance, evaluate student satisfaction, but you'd also be evaluating, the time that it takes. We see that in the LMS analytics. How long are people engaged with material? Are we appropriately approximating the time and professionalism required to do the work? Look at, from the admissions data, correlations between that data and their success in the program. And then finally, in the outcomes and impact measures is where we'd have to baseline where we are. We'd also have to baseline against other in-state programs to ensure that we're meeting at those levels. And then over the long term, see if the changes, or if changes are made, whether they affect the effectiveness of the program overall.
Okay, thank you.
This is just the general admissions. They go through the coursework. They work on the clinical placement on alternative teaching certification license. When they're successful and they've passed the appropriate exam, we put them forward for licensure.
Okay.
And that would conclude my very brief and speedy presentation.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Frey, for highlighting the changes. And the additional graphics are definitely helpful to understanding your program. Okay. Members, do we have any questions at this point? Are we ready to go? Okay. So then we get then down to the first area of rating, which is financial stability. Were there any comments on that? It seemed to have the evidence that we needed. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
My only question would have been potentially, Catcher, I didn't bring this up last time either, but it's basically just a narrative, but there's really, I don't remember there being any sort of like documentation of like financial solvency. Do we need to see anything like that?
Madam Chair and Member Aragon, I think that's kind of at the discretion of the committee as to what you would like to see in there. I think the prompt. I think if you're uncertain, I think I would probably defer to if any specificity that the prompt has, and it's a description of the budget of the program. So I think moving forward, if you would
Yep.
like to see some more specific documentation, we can update the application.
Yeah.
I just don't recall in the formation of this committee that we were going to be tasked with doing financial analysis.
The numbers they looked a little too round,
For the budget, they probably do look
Yeah.
round because we charge $5,000 a head.
Yeah.
And so you say if we get 200 people in the program, it's pretty easy to get a round number up front. Yeah. And a lot of times expenditure is on a percentage, ends up being very close to a percentage of what you put out. we have experience launching different types of online programs. That is a pretty it's not an aggressive budget at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, then we can go on to the next item, which is Program Description Standard 1, Learner Development. Were there any comments from committee members on that one? Or questions asking for more information?
No, not on that one.
I would like to note that I appreciated the inclusion of high leverage practices in the curriculum. That is a significant advancement that we haven't seen too often. It's relatively new, bringing this in within the last couple of years, and it is absolutely inclusive of all learners, and I appreciated seeing that in there. And I also like seeing that learner development matrix. That was extraordinarily clear and helped frame all of the areas that we're looking for. All right, next, Standard 2, Learning Differences. Were there any questions for more information or any comments from the members? No. I like the activity of having to create a learner profile of ELL student. That is a very strong activity to get people to understand, teachers to understand and personalize a student, and not just global teaching bodies out there, but making that understanding that it's personal one-to-one connections that are made. All right. Go on to Learning 3, Standard 3, Learning Environments. Were there any questions or requests for additional information there?
No, I mean, I appreciate the creation of the ILUP. I think that that's something that most Arizona educators struggle with, especially because they're not in an SEI classroom. And to have to create that, especially as middle school for me as a content specialist, it's not something that I was trained to do. And it's kind of, I don't know about your experience, but it's kind of handed down from veteran teachers on how to do it.
Right.
A lot of training on that one.
Yeah. So I appreciated that.
Any other questions? Member Reedy, be sure to pop in when you need to.
I will make sure that I do so.
Okay. Next one, Standard 4, Content Knowledge. Were there any questions there?
Standard 4. No, I mean, it's a kind of overall comment. I really appreciate the use of UBD, essential questions, performance assessments. I think that's something that is going to be difficult for the current education population to kind of get on board with, but I know it's how the new standards for science and social studies are written. We spent a lot of time last year and this year trying to help support educators in understanding UBD and essential questions and how to start almost backwards on what you're teaching your students, and it's a big PD gap that the state has, and so a lot of districts are doing that on their own.
The only question that I had was explicit instruction in the early reading and math development concepts. And I don't know if I missed it. I mean, I saw there were examples given of second grade level, but again, we're looking at when we're talking about these teachers are going to be certified for K1, 2, and we're really looking at those very early developing those early literacy skills and math skills, focusing heavily on numeration, the 5 pillars. And I just wanted to hear a little bit more about that, if there's, how that's going to be addressed.
Yes, Annie and Sarah, do you guys want to jump up, or Annie? She's going to address it best, so if that's all right.
Yes, sure, thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, board members. Thank you so much for having us. I just wanted to introduce myself again. My name is Dr. Annie Tran, PhD in Curriculum Studies, Master's in Multilingualism and Multiliteracies. I'm certified in ELL and Special Education. Very happy to be here and to speak to you about our curriculum. So if I understand, you are asking about the early literacy stages of development and where that is in our program.
Right.
So there is a specific amount of readings devoted to literacy development. It occurs at the beginning of our literacy methods lesson 2. It is strictly about stages of reading and writing development. However, we also include oral as well as, let me double check, academic and communicative stages. We require our teacher candidates to understand each stage with detail, and that comes with the readings that we have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Let's go on to standard 5, application of content. Were there any questions? I appreciated the inclusion of STEM and principles into the lessons. That's really forward thinking. And then your SAMR model, the substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition as it applies to technology integration, was also really strong. And again, this throughout the documents, both the elementary program and the secondary, it was just such a strong emphasis on differentiation, because that really is the nature of the classroom now. We have differentiated learners, and there's no longer a homogeneous group of students. Teaching students how to write lesson plans and project-based learning plans. That was another very strong part. Okay, then let's go on to standard 6, assessment. Were there any questions or comments? Using backwards design, that's the route to go.
Favorite.
It's absolute. It works. You start with the end in mind. What's the assessment? How are we going to get there? That was very, very strong in your program. All right. No other questions. Standard 7, planning for instruction. Were there any questions there? Okay, that's good. Go on to standard 8, instructional strategies. Were there any questions? There was you did mention research-based methodology. Research-based was written in here throughout, that would appear, but I'm wondering, how are you addressing that with your students? Are they researching themselves? Are you having them do any research? Dr. Tran?
We are definitely focused on inquiry-based learning and allowing our students to define what they're most interested in, as well as what they don't know. So really encouraging them to really step out of their boundaries. So if there is a question that they have in mind about what they'd like to research, we definitely are able to assess against that. So Dr. Nikki Richard, who's actually on the phone with us, can speak a little bit towards that as well. Does that help answer the question?
Yes, I was just wondering how, if there was guidance from you on on helping them through those questions, because I know one thing I have learned and become so intimately acquainted with in my career, if there are things I don't know, I don't even know how to ask a question. And so, you can say, if you have any questions, feel free, please ask. Okay, everything's good. I don't know anything, and I can't think of any questions either. So, and that's going to certainly be true of all of your teacher candidates, that they're not going to know what questions to ask. And when we're talking about research-based methodologies, just wondered what your guidance was there. How you're going to guide them.
I think there are so many different ways that we can spark that curiosity. So the first way is really keeping abreast on the Arizona Department of Education website and those continual releases of information. I think that's a great way for our teacher candidates to be on top of that. Another way is our preparation coordinator is very available to inform our students on these new updates, making sure that they know what's happening in Arizona. And lastly, through Canvas with Dr. Nikki Richard, through those discussions, the feedback in discussions from each other, asking questions about that.
And I think we can add as well that early on in Module 2, when we really start diving deep into what it means to be teaching English English as a second language, this is where we incorporate the use of live binders, which is an online platform to store research, and the teacher candidates share their live binders among each other and through the use of a discussion board. So what may help them produce questions as well as their own sort of arsenal of research to inform their practice as they move on.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. That's excellent. That helps me understand. Standard 9, professional learning and ethical practice. Were there any questions there?
I have questions on that one. I'm a little bit concerned about the use of the Association of American Educators as a place to go for code of ethics. There are other groups that I just checked with Catchers. There's other groups that are nationally research-based known to provide that. The group does not necessarily seem to be the most non-political kind of group to engage in this discussion. And in fact, I'm very honest, I gave zeros for that because when I looked at it, it is not comparative to what other groups are out there. So the NASDAQ is what I was asking Catcher about, which does do, as a national group that does a lot of work on this and is working with the state board on stuff. So I'm concerned about the use of that group for this specific piece regarding the code of ethics. Very important piece, clearly in the media's eye, in our educators' eye, very important piece. So I just have a concern with that group being even involved in anything going through the board.
Okay, all right.
Member Garcia?
Yes.
Thank you so much for that comment. Definitely will fix that. However, our primary model code of ethics is in our very first
Right.
M0 or
Right.
welcome. So we do draw upon that model of code of ethics as our primary model.
Right.
But thank you so much.
Yeah, if you look at the website, just the first thing it says is we're an anti-union pro-charter group, which is fine. Which is fine. But I don't necessarily know if ADE should be stepping into that political forum right now, especially right now. So when I went on there, I just so you know, I don't think that would fly in other states, but I just, in this specific one, I looked at the website and I was like, whoa, this may not be a place we want. If you go to their front page website, it says click on here and you can see a fairly vetted out research-based discussion on what ethics should look like.
Very fair.
Okay.
Is it fair to say that if we could make that change going forward, if it's felt to be inappropriate at the state level?
It's up to the committee. I just know that's when I did a little bit of research.
Okay.
You guys can discuss it.
And I guess for me, I focused on the code of ethics in their manual. And because I felt, I thought that was that was the content that the candidates would be taught.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I did not look farther. Certainly the 504 site was fine, citing the U.S. government. So, and IDEA.
Yeah.
So they were fine. And ADA.
Yeah, the rest of it
those
is fine.
sites were
I just saw that, and I have an issue with that being presented to potential classroom members who are going to have access to that. As like, the code of ethics is great, yours is great, but then when you're like, also look at this, it's kind of like, Anyway, that's my. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe recognize Madam
Go
Chair.
ahead.
Madam Chairwoman, thought here is, I guess the question I would like to ask is, can you tell us a little bit about like what drove the decision to focus on that organization, or to use that organization's code of ethics?
It was found through our research regarding
Okay.
The organizations that were adopted by other Arizona EPPs.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I guess my thoughts on it would be, we all hold our own personal beliefs and ideals, and there are folks on who sit behind this table who I think would embrace very much what maybe this organization stands for, and that might not be like what I would embrace, but I also would be concerned if we did not allow different organizations who are applying for alternative certification programs to allow them to take their own slant on things. So I don't, as a member of the committee, have any personal problems with what I see here on their website, even though I may disagree with this organization vehemently on a personal and political level.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to take my personal out of it, but what I'm saying is when you're asking potential educators to look at this and reflect on it, it may be important to be aware of, just like in my classroom, I'm showing a kind of a loaded piece instead of going to a group that we already have a relationship with through the state board that does a similar code of ethics, that does not necessarily engage in political organizing. So that's it, regardless of my personal.
And I would say that we don't have a political slant on it.
Right.
So if you said to us today, take that out, or even if you don't say that, you say, you know what, we see this political slant that maybe, because it's not in our model code of ethics. It's
Right.
it's
It's
as
somebody
part of an
else's.
activity inside of a course. And maybe because it's slanted, we didn't give the other side. We'd be happy to add NASDAQ or remove it and replace it. This is not a hill that we would want
Right.
to die on in
Right.
any way, shape, or form. That we want to provide like a great code of ethics for educators.
Right,
We
I
want
agree.
people to come out and impact students in a positive way. The reaction that the committee's having gives me pause. I would probably take it out just based on the reaction. That being said, if we wanted to present a more balanced view, there's another approach we can take, which is provide both. Or if we want to do the one that's the Arizona State Board of Education, the one that you have a relationship with, we would be happy to do so. And I don't think that would be pushing any kind of political view, because we are in no way we're trying to push a political view.
Perhaps committee members could suggest to Mr. Baden some recommendations for other sources. I would hesitate that our committee would recommend just one, but if there are several sources that these alternative teacher preparation programs could consider, that might be.
We know
That
that
might
in
be up
Hawaii
for
they adopted
consideration.
a state model code of ethics. So in Hawaii, that's what stands. So,
A list would be very welcome. We would be really interested
we're welcome
to see.
we welcome the feedback, appreciate it, and are willing to consider alternatives to what is currently listed in the course.
I just want to, if I may, double check. This was not inserted into this application because you all are aligning yourselves with this organization in some sort of like political way.
In no way.
Thank
For
you.
the purpose of clarity, there is no political alignment with that organization.
Thank you.
And I just want to say that was not my intention at all.
Great.
However, when I clicked on the link and I started to read
Yeah,
through,
yeah,
I was
there's
on the
some
board
interesting
and that
things,
kind of
yeah.
stuff. It's like, and I had, quite frankly, had a discussion with Alicia Williams about other work that they were doing with the group that is of all state directors, where they meet and had this conversation regarding discipline. So it was not towards you all, but when I opened it up, I thought, why would they choose this? And then went back going, where did I hear this conversation? I had one with board staff regarding a different one that existed.
I think it's welcome feedback, and we would be happy to review and make any changes that would be appropriate to align with what the Arizona State Board of Education doing right now.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, let's go on to Standard 10, Leadership and Collaboration. Were there any questions on this one? I really like the one of the activities to ameliorate disconnects and eliminate barriers to parent communication. That is just, I hear that way too often. Well, I called the parent and they didn't get back to me. Okay, well, I sent a note and they didn't get back to me. Well, how many students don't take notes home? So I really appreciated that. Also, understanding the inclusion of school improvement plans.
Yeah.
That was novel and different, and that's very important here in the state of Arizona, that every entity have a school improvement plan. And then to develop teacher leaders, researching a book and developing book study plans. Oh, I have lots of I have access to a lot of those. No, I don't do them myself. I have other people that do that, but can give you some really great ones that are not just related to special education. So I'll be happy to give you some titles. So, are there any questions on that one?
This area was greatly improved.
Significantly so. The application review process. Any other? Were there any questions there?
No.
Levels. How about the enrollment application forms? Were there any questions?
No.
No.
Fine to me. District and school participants. You've done some work there. Gotten some. You've gotten districts lined up, school names, contacts. That was good. Questions?
Well, I'm sorry. When I looked at it, it had a lot of like emails going back and forth. Was there any that have now been confirmed?
At
Sorry.
this point, no one's confirmed because they're waiting to see if
Okay.
if we're
Approved.
confirmed.
Right, okay.
Yeah, that's fair.
But we have added to that list, we've added districts like Scottsdale and Paradise Valley, because those districts have a large number of national board certified teachers, and ideally we want to combine our student teachers with really highly effective teachers, and so we're creating a list of those. We're also working with the Arizona K-12 Center in identifying schools and mentors and good, highly effective teachers that are willing to take our students.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. Let's go on then to the next one. Describing the length of time candidate will be required to participate in a supervised school-based experience. Any questions there?
No.
I did have a question. I'm not sure if it's C2 or C3, but the informal evaluations by school-based people and the formal evaluations, so I think it's page 150. They were going to do 4 evaluations. Are these separate than the ones that they're doing? Because these people are in the classroom, the teacher of record, correct?
The teacher of record.
They're the teacher of record at this point in the program. So, yeah, sorry.
We're,
Or are they
you mean
student
they're,
teaching?
like they're cooperative
So many times, the majority of the time, they'll be the teacher of record.
Okay.
There will be people that could participate in the program where they do a standard student teaching
Right.
placement, but I think if we look at what's taking place in Hawaii right now,
Mm-hmm.
and if we look at the state, there's some similarities in terms of shortages. A lot of times, these people will be the teacher of
Okay.
record. It's not I think the pause was, it's not a guarantee that they will
Right.
be,
It
but
could be a mix.
it's highly likely that they could be.
Yeah. So my question about being teacher of record and having the 4 informal, correct, and
Yeah.
4 formal, is how does that interchange happen that they're also being formally evaluated by their districts? If they're the teacher of record, they're also being informally and formally evaluated. So I just wonder about the interplay and pressure, because I've seen it where you have teachers that are going through all prep programs that are also, for instance, having Rio Salado in there, or ASU people in there, and then you also have the district folks in there, their district coaches in there, and they may be 2 different evaluation models that are looking for 2 different things, and so there's a lot of I'm just wondering how they all kind of interplay together for this person who's just starting in the profession, because it's a lot, right? Not that I don't want there to be a lot, but just
I think there's a reality that there's a lot of work if you're going to do your coursework, you're going to do your evaluations, you've got your requirements of your job and your school and your district, as well as us having to do those evaluations. That being said, I think it would be unfair for us to say that, we shouldn't do evaluations because the districts are going to do them, because we're going to put them forward for licensure. So is there going to be a fair amount of pressure? Yes. The Danielson framework is what most districts in Arizona should be using. So there shouldn't be some major disconnect between how these evaluations are being done. The pre and post conference, I think, can be really valuable for them. So using the stuff that they're doing with us to potentially support their job-based evaluations, which I think potentially come with more pressure, because that impacts their ability to continue work in the profession. Whereas, the informal and formal observations that we're doing, we can build upon them each time. You're allowed to make mistakes as part of this. That's the point. We do a pre-conference, we do a post-conference, and you work with those teachers and you support them as they get better. It's not that there's one evaluation and they pass or fail this program. It's the reason for 8. Yes, that's more work potentially for them, but I do think it's valuable in terms of developing their skill, especially if they're the teacher of record, providing those supports. So I think we just have to be cognizant of the timing. Don't force them into a timing if they have a district evaluation. Have that communication level with them, but ensure that we're evaluating them appropriately.
Yeah, I think that the reason why I brought it up is that I just I believe in observations, both formal and informal. The pre and post for me as an educator really did help me grow. I just worry that potentially they're going to be formally evaluated 6 times a year and informally evaluated 6 times a year. That's a lot of pressure under normal circumstances, and so just to be cognizant of how we can make all of them work together so that they are interplaying and supporting the development and not necessarily putting pressure. So that's the only question I had, is how can we support, the work?
Absolutely. And the 4 formal observations that they will do within their clinical placement are either done by Dr. Richard, who's on the line, or their preparation coordinator, who they will be very well versed with and have developed a relationship at this point that those observations will take on a slightly
different
less
lens.
stress, in a different lens, absolutely. And also, too, they're very, we hope that through our coursework and clinical placement that they are aware that, Member Aragon, as you said, we all come with different ideas as to what is the right direction for anything. They know that to take on the different feedback from everybody, it may not make sense to the other observer, but to take it all in and use that feedback as goals to move forward.
Is there any conversation? I'm sorry,
thank you. As and my comment, because it relates directly to this, and that as I work with multiple districts here and in a couple of counties, there's no standard teaching evaluation that's used by the state. Districts have their own. Multiple districts have created their own. Yes, it's based on the work of Danielson, but it is also, they have different elements. And there's not a way for the alternative preparation programs to coordinate that. And as I work with, as I mentor teachers in alternative preparation type programs, they, that's how we talk with them, that this is just all part of helping you get ready for your big district eval. It's just more feedback, more opportunities for feedback, which first-year teachers don't get. They don't have that opportunity for more feedback. They just get the big evals. So when they come through. Member Aragon.
You know what? I think I'm just going to be quiet.
I'm sorry.
No.
I think one other point was that it does come up several times to make sure that you understand the values of your particular school, the district, the region, so that when you do perhaps head to a new position, that you are fully understanding that and taking that into account to your teaching.
Okay. Are there any other questions on A7C2?
No.
Okay, then let's go on to C3, A7C3, explaining how the structure, supervision, evaluation of the school-based experience prepares candidates. Were there any questions there?
I just want to understanding about the supervising practitioner. I think you guys started to talk a little bit about the relationship that you're trying to build with NPCT and K-12 Center, the supervising practitioner. What does that look like? Because I read they have to have, effective or highly effective with the principal class, and and they get the stipend. Is there an application they fill out, or what's the
You're
process?
talking about the mentor teacher,
The
class-
supervising practitioner.
So,
Oh, Kathy, sorry. Dr. Frericks, if you could come to the microphone so Member Reedy can hear.
go ahead.
Yeah, so the first thing we'd look for is to see if there's a recommendation from a principal in a school. Because I think that is, if there's an effective or highly effective person at that grade level or around that grade level in the school, that's going to be our best course of action. That's willing. And so that's where the stipend, we have standard training in terms of how our evaluations will be done and what the expectations would be, and we sign a contract with them, albeit a small contract, but it aligns their efforts with ours. With regards to, looking at other organizations like K-12 and that sort of stuff, we know that sometimes it may be hard to get an effective or highly effective practitioner in the school to be a mentor, or they may not be available. So that's when we start to say, what else is available? How else might we do this? Whether through the use of technology or partnership and these kinds of things. So in general, we'd look for a recommendation, and then we'd go through a training with them and sign a contract with them. I think that would be the general answer, if that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to we're having a larger conversation about mentor programs in the state, so I'm just trying to engage on what supervising practitioner means in this scope as well as, in other districts. So it sounds like you're using principal and then availability and then highly, using their evaluation and so forth. Okay, right.
Yeah, I think that would be the process that we'd use. And then if we're not able, I think something like the K-12 Center would be extremely valuable for us to potentially highlight highly effective mentors that either are around or in that school if the principal hasn't given them to us. So, I think the state has certain resources that we can draw on and work with. And then, from there, hopefully we don't have to get creative.
Yeah. I mean, you're not dealing with anything that traditional programs aren't dealing with.
Exactly the same thing.
I was a clinical instructor at Arizona State University. I taught the student teaching course, and we used to have a lot of trouble always finding those really qualified mentor teachers. So,
And that's what I did for years too, and I understand. Yeah.
sure.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, then let's go on to A7C4, explaining how supervised school-based experience will promote effectiveness of the candidate. Are there any questions? We've had a lot of conversation right in and about that area.
Did you want to talk about student starts to underperform?
We're not there yet.
Oh, okay.
No, it's coming up. The next forms for the school-based experience. Were there any questions there? No. Staff roles, responsibilities, and credentials.
That's great.
That was a thorough description. The time needed to complete the program. Questions? A description of the manner in which a candidate will be evaluated for success. Anybody have any questions there? Besides me. And my question was, what's the process for when candidates exhibit inadequate performance in assignments and observations? We saw the grading rubric that looked great. The percentages, that looked strong to me. But it didn't address what happens when a candidate is not meeting performance expectations. Now what?
There's a few different things, and I know Dr. Nikki Wishart is with us online, so in a moment I'll probably have her speak also to this. But if somebody's not meeting expectations, I have an answer written down, so just bear with me for 1 minute.
Is that in your executive summary? Is there a document that we have that I missed it?
Yeah.
Not particular, like not, we have, what are the requirements for dismissal from the program that are written in a document? We have that sort of thing. In terms of supporting candidates, I think that are having difficulty, because dismissal is one thing, or not recommendation for licensure, but then those that are struggling is a very different thing. And so the first thing that we usually do is have them speak with the online mentor and go through, why they're struggling. We can create mastery paths. So if somebody was unable, inside the LMS, inside of Canvas, you can create mastery paths that allow people to go through certain areas of work where they may have underperformed and redo or reread certain things to meet certain standards. So that's another mechanism we can use. Nikki, I'll speak for you for a sec, just because we were speaking about this just yesterday. At times, if there's been things where an assignment was handed in before the grading was done and it really missed the point of the assignment, it's just that please resubmit. We'd rather you get the learning, and then we'll grade it at a slight disadvantage, then grade you to a massive disadvantage because you missed the purpose of the learning. And Nikki, you could probably talk a little bit more to that.
Yes, thank you. As the online mentor, I get to see all of the wonderful work that comes in from the student, and from time to time, we have had some students submit something where they did maybe miss the point or misunderstand the assignment or the purpose. For me as an online mentor and teacher, I would honestly prefer for them to go back and revisit the concepts rather than simply docking points. I think it is most beneficial for the learners to revisit and just kind of get a better understanding of those items. I think that is most beneficial for the learner. And as Renee pointed out, there is, of course, the small disadvantage for the grading at that point. But I, again, feel that it's most beneficial that they revisit the information to come out with a better understanding.
All right, thank you. Member Aragon?
Madam Chairwoman, what if their classroom is like destructive or unsafe? You talked a little bit about like if they're struggling on the assignments end. What if they're struggling in their teaching, in their actual practice? What do you do then? Okay,
so first of all, we need to be supporting them and also keeping students safe. So an unsafe classroom is not a great place for any teacher to be or any student to be. So when we look at that, it's, okay, what kind of supports do we have in place? So Kathy would be able to, work with show up in the school more often. We'll give supports online. We'll also say, hey, is there more observation we can do? Is there certain supports? But at a certain, so I think you end up want to provide everything possible to try and help that person create a safe environment in the classroom. I think that, there's levels of that. You don't want somebody to continue forever and put them forward for licensure just because they have a couple good lessons if there's an unsafe place. So I think you have to find the point where that works or doesn't, and that would be also in conjunction with the leadership of the school if you're running into issues, I presume, because they're an employee of the school. Collaborating with them.
Thank you. Thank you for answering my questions. Are there any other comments? The next one then, tracking and evaluation documents. Are there any questions there?
No questions.
Quite a few satisfaction surveys for everybody who's touching those
They say satisfaction
candidates?
surveys, but it looks as, how are they engaging with the material? Are they learning what they want to learn? Are we providing the appropriate supports online? These sorts of things.
And a question, were these surveys during the process or all afterwards?
So we do one at the end of each module. So we actually
That's
say, okay, at the end of module 1, so you don't have to get to the end of the program and go, hey, what did I do in module 1? Yeah, that was fine. Click, click, click. So before they move on to module 2, we have them do the module 1 stuff. So we're getting real-time feedback on that. And then, but we would never, you want a critical amount of data before you make major substantive changes. But if something's wrong that's not substantive or is substantive that you can fix quickly, sometimes we'll do that based on the feedback from students. But that typically it's not substantive. Usually it's quite small in terms of user experience or linking stuff online.
Okay, thank you. Then the last one, program success. Any questions there? No, I didn't have any questions. Did appreciate the academic control structure, that document. Are there any other questions? Okay, then I think at this point, if we just take maybe about a 5 or 10 minute recess and we'll tally up all the numbers. Is that the correct process, Mr. Baden? Thank you. Member Reedy, are you back on, still on the phone with us?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. And you got your scores to Mr. Baden, right?
Yes, I emailed Mr. Baden my score.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead on to the secondary section now, and we can just go head right directly into the items, the rating items. We'll give the tallies on both programs at the end. So the first one, financial stability. Were there any questions? No questions. The learner development. Were there any questions under the learner development standard 1? No. Okay. No questions there. Again, strong emphasis on differentiation and with identifying students with special needs as well as English language learners. Standard 2, learning differences. Any questions? I really appreciated the activity in Module 4, a learning example provided with, it was so realistic, having to do a plan for 2 students, one with behaviors, and then another student who was working above grade level. That's a really strong activity to have, framing those examples for your teacher candidates. Thank you. Standard 3, learning environments. Were there any questions? Standard 4, content knowledge. Any questions? Standard 5, application of content. Standard 6, assessment. Standard 7, planning for instruction. Standard 8, instructional strategies. Any questions? The Standard 9, professional learning and ethical practice. Was there a comment there? Was there something? Okay, fine. Standard 10, leadership and collaboration. Questions? And then the application and review process, A7B. Describe application and review process. Any questions? That was pretty standard. Enrollment forms and descriptions. Same. The 7C1, the districts and schools, any questions about those? They were there. The C2, length of time, that was consistent. Questions? C3, supervision and evaluation, it's the same. C4, any questions there? C5, questions? A8, staff roles, responsibilities, the same. Time to complete the program, acceptable evidence of how much that would take. Description of the manner in which candidate will be evaluated by success. I still had the same question there. Anything else? And tracking and evaluation of documents. Any questions there? Program success. Any other questions? Okay. Do you have all of our answers there, Katja? I didn't make any changes on mine. Okay. So they're coming. They're coming. If we could take another short 10-minute recess. Thank you. Get these tallies.